Hi, I am Julie. I'm the Community Marketing Manager here at Frog Street. Today we have Claudia Castillo Mayanez. Um, she's going to be presenting on strategies to increase vocabulary in young children. She's our professional learning bilingual specialist here at Frog Street. Our comprehensive program. Got all that fun curriculum. I see Froggy. That's my favorite. All right, this is Claudia. She has dedicated 27 years of her career to supporting educators, children, and families. Currently, she is a professional development bilingual specialist with Frog Street and an adjunct faculty at San Antonio College. She has obtained a Master of Education in Early Childhood with bilingual specialization from Texas A&M, which has been instrumental in her career. Claudia began her journey as a parent volunteer and soon after moved into the classroom where she served as a teacher, teaching monolingual and bilingual children from birth to 5 years of age. Since then, she expanded her influence, serving as coach and mentor, supporting teachers who implemented the Frog Street curriculum. Her career experience includes administrating a Head Start program serving over 3,000 children and their families, as well as supporting administrators. Claudia is certified as a Train the Trainer for class toddler and infant, toddler, and pre-K class reliable observer, which is an attribute used in many of her presentations and coaching. Claudia holds a family service credential and is a mastered registered trainer in the state of Texas. She once served as the president for the San Antonio chapter of TXAEYC. Claudia believes that lifelong learning is the key to honoring her skills and knowledge to turn and share with others to continue advancing the early childhood field. Claudia is an advocate for high-quality early childhood education and a support for early childhood educators, children, and families. That is all about Claudia, but you're going to learn more because she's got a presentation for us today. And yeah, go ahead, Claudia. We would love to hear you speak.
Thank you so much, Julie, for that thorough introduction of myself. I'm so happy to be here with you today to share with you strategies to increase children's vocabulary, which is a critical role in young children's learning to read, and as a result, their overall success in school, and not only for school, but later in many years to come. And so I'm honored to be here with you to share all that information with you. Today, we will discuss vocabulary development in young children and the research that determines the role it plays in a child's ongoing education. We're also going to be looking at myths of vocabulary instruction, many that are still practiced today, but have little or no validity to long-term vocabulary memory. We're going to look at the latest research on the most effective vocabulary teaching strategies from the National Literacy Panel. And then we were also going to explore a variety of strategies. We have 8 strategies that are recommended by the National Reading Panel. And as we go through the presentation, I do want to invite you to create some action steps to take away from today's session so that you can put into practice when you go back into your classrooms or your programs, for those of you who are administrators joining us in today's session. So I hope again that you're able to take a lot of these tools back with you. So what is vocabulary? Well, Webster defines vocabulary as knowledge of words and word meanings. More specifically, we use vocabulary to refer to the kind of words that children or students must know to read increasingly demanding text with comprehension. Not only at the moment, but comprehension that it's something that expands and deepens over time. So we want to make sure we provide that to children. And just to clarify, we're not teaching children to read text, but we have the opportunity to teach vocabulary that will benefit their ability to read and comprehend that text when they go into first grade and beyond. So just a little bit of clarification on that. So who needs vocabulary instruction? Well, the most cited research noting early vocabulary development comes from a study that began in 1995 called the Early Catastrophe by Hart and Risley. And I'm sure that being in the early childhood field, you have probably heard about this so many times, right? The majority of the early research was done in homes, and the findings revealed gaps between socioeconomic groups. Children from low socioeconomic welfare homes showed a significant lower growth of vocabulary than those from working class homes. And if you notice at the top line, those children from professional level families. So we see about an 86 to 98% of the words recorded in the child's vocabulary consisted of words also recorded in the parents' vocabulary, meaning that the parents were using those words with their children in order to give them the exposure that was needed for them to carry that vocabulary on. Now, when we look at the type of vocabulary or the kind of vocabulary that they were using, the 18 to 20 years of the Hart-Risley study led to additional studies, lots of publications and research on vocabulary development in young children. The most profound results of all the research points to the long-term effects of vocabulary development and instruction. So in looking at the graph, you can see that the average child in a professional family was accumulating 32 affirmatives and 5 prohibitions per hour. And when we talk about prohibitions, we're talking about like the commands and the no's, those common things that we normally use. The average child in a working class family was accumulating 12 affirmatives and 7 prohibitions per hour. And then the average child in welfare or family was accumulating 5 affirmatives and 11 prohibitions. So you can see that we were using more of those commands and no's within the welfare family population than we were with the professional ones. And so at 4, an average child in a professional family will experience almost about 45 million words. An average child in the working class family will experience 26 million words. And in looking at a child in a welfare family, the average child would have experienced only 13 million words. So that's a huge gap when it comes to looking at, what children are bringing into our classroom when they come and join us. And there's more evidence of the importance of teaching vocabulary. We see the first one there where it says oral vocabulary at the end of first grade is a significant predictor of comprehension 10 years later. And then in the second one, language processing speed means that when a child sees or hears a word, how quickly they understand. So to me, that means if I showed you a fruit grown in Africa that you did not know, you would process how it looked, how it smelled, and connect to something similar as you learn the name of the fruit. You might or might not remember the next time, but multiple exposures, which we're going to be talking about a lot today, would help you increase the language processing speed to understand the word. And then in the third one, the size of a child's vocabulary is associated with improvements in the ability to attend to the sounds of language. So here we're looking at great connections to phonological awareness, such as rhyming, alliteration, onset rhyme, and so forth, so that we can give children that exposure that they need. And so now that we've kind of got a lot of that research information under our belt, let's move on to vocabulary myths. There's common myths of vocabulary development, and they hold some partial truth, often like folk wisdom. And, and I say that because as an early childhood educator, I've experienced quite a bit of what goes on in the classrooms. At one time, some authorities reflected a philosophy of wait and see. The child will develop when they're ready. And honestly, back in the 1990s, that was my way of understanding things too, right? My child will grow and they'll learn the language and they'll be fine. But we know through neurological research that the brain develops or is wired at specific times that are opportunities of learning. We call those the windows of opportunity, right? And this research has provided us with specific timelines to engage children in early learning. New findings suggest that not only can we improve children's vocabulary, but we can also accelerate it with instruction, and that's key. We need to be part of that give and take conversation, that back and forth exchange that we're having with the children. And so Dr. Susan Newman, she's a professor and author of multiple publications and research. Her latest publication, All About Words, Increasing Vocabulary in the Common Core Classroom, pre-K through second grade, identify 5 common myths about vocabulary development and instruction. And so the first one is that children are word sponges. In the past, it was determined that children can learn words through fast mapping. The notion that words can be learned based on single exposure, rather than learning words by predicting relationships between objects and sound. We know now that we need to make sure that we're giving children a relationship between that. Myth number 2, there's a vocabulary explosion. The course of word learning has little to do with vocabulary bursts or spurts. In contrast, work learning is cumulative. The high performing students who know many thousands of words has learned them not by having received a yelled or oral language early on, but by occurring bits of the word knowledge for each of the 1,000 of words they encounter on a daily basis. So again, those are the 2 first one. Let's look at a couple other more. Another one is that storybook reading is sufficient for oral vocabulary development. And reading books, especially when we're doing a read aloud, children, that's a powerful and motivating source of vocabulary development for children. However, it is not likely to be potent enough to narrow the substantial gap for children who may be at risk for reading difficulties. Teachers will need to adjust the read aloud experience with more intentional strategies that require children to process words at deeper levels of understanding, whether it be we're bringing in a prop or we're fluctuating our voice to help children understand what we are saying. So it's not just I'm going to read aloud and children are going to gain the knowledge from there. Myth number 4, we do it all the time. And believe me, my early years is like, well, I've done it like this for years. Why do I have to change it, right? With the Common Core State Standards, children will be expected to understand content-related words in science, in history. So this means that we cannot rely on teachable moments alone to help children develop word meaning. Rather, we're going to need to be proactive in selecting words that have greater application to academic tests with increasingly complex concepts. And so we're gonna talk a little bit more about that in depth and seeing how do we even begin to select the words that we're going to be teaching children. And then myth number 5, just follow the vocabulary scope and sequence. Yes, it's important for us to follow that scope and sequence. It's there for a reason, right? Especially when it's been researched and we know that that's what children need to have in order for them to learn. But we also want to ensure we're following that scope and sequence based on not only the standards that we have to implement, but ensuring that we understand that every curriculum has their own focus. And so with that, we have to make sure that it's aligned to the state standards and everything else that comes along. Students need a specialized language. Some describe it as academic language to convey their ideas, and that facilitates the development of more complex concepts in multiple disciplines. But again, following that scope and sequence alone, we have to make sure that it does apply to what we're trying to teach children, and that is meeting the standards that we're looking to obtain. So research-based strategies gives us solid foundations for teaching vocabulary. We took some of the strategies from the National Reading Panel. They investigated 8 strategies for teaching vocabulary, but we also got some strategies from Reading Rockets. Again, so that we're able to incorporate those in our settings when we're working with little ones. And so let's look at what those are. So the first one comes from the National Reading Panel. And it says here to provide direct instruction of vocabulary words for a specific text. And this came from Anderson and Nagy. They pointed out that there are precise words children may need to know in order to comprehend particular lessons or subject matters. So, for example, if I'm reading a book to a child, let's say me when I was younger, I'm originally from Mexico. We don't eat porridge in Mexico. We eat atole. For those of you that understand that, right? Oatmeal, but atole in Spanish. If you would have told me the story and read to me about the porridge was too hot or it was too cold, I would have no idea of what you were telling me. This word means, yes, hot cereal like oatmeal or cream of wheat or atole in my case. But if I would have not seen a picture, I would have had no concept of what you were telling me. So we want to provide the child that direct instruction, whether it be showing them pictures, getting them a few props, so that they understand what you're trying to provide to them as far as the information. So that's the first one. Let's look at the second one. Repetition and multiple exposure to vocabulary items are important. And this came from Stahl. And he cautioned against mere repetition or drill of the word, emphasizing that vocabulary instruction should provide students with opportunities to encounter words repeatedly and in a variety of contexts. So, for example, we read the story The Enormous Turnip, right? And we're talking about the word and we're highlighting the word enormous. We even have a vocabulary word of it. Well, then when the child is playing in free choice centers and they're building in the block area and they make a big structure, then I can come in and say, Claudia, your block tower is so tall. It is enormous, like the enormous turnip in the book we read earlier. So we're making a connection. We're giving the children the multiple exposure, and we're repeating the word in different settings so that the child is understanding it. We're giving it to them in different ways that they can reuse that word again. So here is another one. Vocabulary words should be those that the learner will find useful in many contexts. Instruction of high frequency words known and used by mature language users can add predictively to an individual's language ability. Research suggests that vocabulary learning follows a developmental trajectory. So, for example, if you read the version that we have in our curriculum of the Three Little Pigs in this developmental storybook, you probably saw the word ambled. It said the 3 little pigs ambled down the road. Well, ambled is not a very common word that we use, frequently. At least I don't use frequently. And so we have to define that word to the child in a manner that they will understand it. So amble means to walk slow. So today, when we go to the playground, let's amble down the sidewalk. So again, we're using that vocabulary word in many different contexts so that the child is able to understand it, and then by them listening to us, they will get to use it again. Then we have vocabulary tasks should be restructured as necessary. Once children know what is expected of them in a vocabulary task, they often learn rapidly, especially if we're being consistent and we're giving them plenty of exposure. So, one of the examples that we have here is we're gonna do maybe a pair and share, or turn to your partner and talk to them, and we're going to be giving them phrases and have them change them around so that it has the same meaning, but we're using a different delivery. So, for example, the horses ate the hay. Another way to say the sentence is the horses gobbled up the hay. And so, again, they're just using a variety. It's kind of a word play, right? But giving them an opportunity for them to engage with one another so that they're able to practice that. Okay, so, and I'll tell you a story behind that first little picture. So the next one is vocabulary. Vocabulary learning is effective when it entails active engagement that goes beyond definitional knowledge. Um, so here, where it's when children know a word, they not only know the word's definition and its logical relationship with other words, they also know how the word functions in different contexts. So if you see that first picture, and yes, I put Taylor Swift because we just came, from that Super Bowl weekend, which I'm not really into, but it was a big deal with Taylor Swift that it was all over the place. I was like, let me just put that picture on there. So it's not that I'm a big fan, but the word fan is it. There's a lot of fans of Taylor Swift right now. So that's we can use the word fan in multiple meaning words. So fan, someone who enjoys something. So Joel is a fan of Taylor Swift. Or fan, a machine that provides cool air. Or fan, used as a verb, if I fan the picnic food to keep the flies away. Acting out or dramatizing the word helps build meaning. But that one word can be used in many different contexts. And so when children begin to gain that experience, they really enjoy and they really engage in the different contexts that it can be used. So again, just putting that out there. Another one is computer technology can be used effectively to help teach vocabulary. Encouragement exists, but relatively few specific instructional applications can be gleaned from the research. So, words in a semantic grouping, which objects are round, or find a picture of the tool that a nurse uses, like the little boy that's with that little iPad, and so he has to point to that. But again, it's just computers are fine. The technology is here to stay, and so we want to make good use of it. But connecting it to what the children are learning, or ways that they can engage with that particular tool to develop more of that vocabulary. Another one is vocabulary can be acquired through incidental learning. Um, Reading volume is very important in the terms of long-term vocabulary development. In later work, Cunningham further recommended structured read alouds, discussion sessions, and even independent reading experience at school and at home to encourage vocabulary growth in students. Of course, developmentally appropriate practices first. So one of the examples that we can do is just giving children many opportunity to engage in different stories, whether we're telling the story or whether we're having them tell a story, so that again we're really incorporating that incidental learning that can happen within. Next, we have dependence on single word vocabulary instruction methods will not result in optimal learning. Stahl stated that vocabulary knowledge is knowledge. The knowledge of a word not only implies a definition, but also implies how that word fits into the world. Um, How many of you remember walking into your school setting when you were younger and you saw a list of like, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 words on the board that you had to learn? You had to learn their meaning, you had to learn how to spell them. I mean, I remember like writing on a notebook a million times that word so that I know how to remember to spell it. And then here comes Friday, and here comes that spelling test, and you had to like, spell all those words that you spent hours filling your pages with just the repeated words so that you can learn it. Um, you know, the studies examined in the NPR report suggested that vocabulary instruction does lead to gains in comprehension, but methods must be appropriate to the reader's age and ability. So it goes back to what I said in the previous slide when we're looking at, is it age appropriate? Well, I wouldn't have a 4-year-old sit down and write vocabulary words on their little journal or notebook a million times so that they know how to spell it. But the exposure that we're giving them throughout the classroom, whether it be we're pointing out or highlighting a word in that read aloud, and then we're bringing in the vocabulary word, and we might have that vocabulary word in the writing center so that children are exposed to it, or on the letter wall. So all those repeated opportunities are going to help the child gain that information. Are they going to be great spellers by the time they leave us? I mean, that's not realistic, right? Thinking about age appropriateness again, but we're giving them that exposure to set the foundation for many years to come and for what they're going to learn later within the years. So those were the 8 strategies that came from the National Reading Panel. Now let's look at principles of effective oral vocabulary instruction. And here the research continues to support the characteristics of the most effective strategies for teaching vocabulary to young children. We're going to look at implicit and explicit instruction, intentional word selection, word clusters, repeated exposure, and intervention, along with different activities that you will be able to implement with you. So first, let's look at implicit and explicit instruction. Implicit words are words that are taught in the moment. This type of words are typically tier 3 words and tend to need a quick explanation using heavy context. They're useful to teach in the moment. So vocabulary that is taught implicitly should be taught naturally without separating instruction. And then we have explicit or direct vocabulary instruction, which includes asking children to attend to a word's explanation and remember its meaning. And although children do learn words incidentally from quality language input, direct teaching vocabulary improves recall of words, and it also deepens understanding of the word's meaning. So we might give children, or we must give children, a child-friendly definition of words before reading. That's going to help with providing that direct instruction of a word. When we read the story and assume that children will learn the word just by listening to indirect instruction, that's where the child is going to get confused. And so if we're asking them questions and they're not responding, more than likely is either 1, they're shy, or 2, they didn't understand because they don't know the words that we're providing them. So we want to try to use both. Studies found that when we define the word and then we engage children in acting out the words, children are going to achieve greater gains of vocabulary. So for example, I talked about the 3 little pigs. One version says that the pigs walk down the road, jiggity, 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 jig. A jig is a little dance. So if I were working with a group of children and I was reading this part, I may either 1, model it if it's their first time hearing it and they don't know what it is, or 2, if it's been repeated before, I might ask one of the children to model the jiggity jig and go down the road, so that again we're building that context in, and we're providing children plenty of opportunities for them to see what it looks like. Okay, so on our next slide we have a video, and I wanted to bring in this video because there's a lot of vocabulary. There's a lot, the children are playing with vocabulary. And so I want us to listen to it and just see if you pick up a lot of the language or a lot of the vocabulary that is being listened to.
Huh? It could be both mine and yours. Oh yeah, you're making the same thing like me. Yeah, that's what I said. Oh, I thought you wasn't. But I already had that circle thing. Well, but it's up to you and me, buddy. Mother, you can hold that. Sit down now. I really put it in. What else are gonna say to me? Well, how about if it don't reach? I can't reach it. Okay. Like that, okay? Okay. Now you can reach it? Yeah, now I can reach it. Here, buddy. We need 2 more. I mean 3 more. There's something under there. This. Here, one. We need 2 more now. Now we still need 2 more. We need 1 more. Oh, 2 more and 1 more. Oh, you were right, 2 more. Uh-huh. Right. I'll try 2 more. You was right. Finish. Well, and we gotta cover these up, right? We gotta put something in here. Oh, remember yesterday and we put peoples in here? Uh-huh. Do I make that again? Yeah. You wanna put some people?
Again, it was just a way to look at that indirect way of listening and playing with words. So the next one is intentional word selection. Preparation is going to be key when it comes to teaching children any context that we teach. Preparing to teach includes selecting vocabulary words that are content related and that will enhance the child's verbal function. We can teach approximately 400 words a year. So we want to make it meaningful. We want to be intentional when we're looking at what are the words that I'm going to highlight that are content related, that enhance that verbal functioning, so that we can get at the end of the year to those 400 words that we want children to take with them. So again, just really making it very intentional and be very prepared when we're looking at that way of teaching children. So what do we want to do? We want to make a list of all the vocabulary words that we want to use to teach the children, whether it be that we're teaching the children those words from a photo card, like the one that you see on the screen, or that we are looking through a book and pre-reading it so that we can select the words that we're going to teach children. When we're doing that, be ready to define them. If that means that I have to make myself a little note to remind me of that child-friendly definition that I'm going to provide to the children, then I'm going to do that because they're going to be exposed to those words. I want to make sure they know them. We also want to, it's going to help us with checking in to see if we have children who may have prior knowledge about that word. If they do have prior knowledge, then we want to extend the knowledge by using the word in different contexts, or even by adding a little bit more of information. So it's all about meeting children where they're at, and if they already know it, then let's give them more so that we can move them to the next step. The next one is building word meaning through word cluster. Clustering words in categories facilitates comprehension, and it also provides accelerated word learning. Children learn best when words are presented in integrated contexts that make sense to them. So again, we want to select that material that we're reading and checking to see what are some cluster words that we can bring together so that when we're presenting it to the children, they're taking even more so with them. Repeated exposure, you've heard this one before. We want to make sure that when we're giving children repeated exposure, we're doing it to the words and their meanings. A recent research project concludes that 24 repetitions of targeted word builds long-term memory for the majority of children. Howard Pushlar researched how to optimize long-term memory. His findings indicated that we retain about 20% of new knowledge every 18 to 36 days. Therefore, repeated exposure is the key to building long-term memory. Also, one of our main authors, Dr. Pam Schiller, reminds us that experiences wire the brain and repetition strengthens the wiring. So again, because of that, we want to make sure that we're giving that exposure. So in this book that you see in the screen, Graham is coming to my house. We want to read the book to our class. It's about travel. We want to introduce the vocabulary words and then define them. And then we want to provide examples on how it is used. Provide synonyms, like suitcase is also a luggage. It's that's a synonym. Point to illustrations in the storybook. Provide learning centers to experience and use that vocabulary word. Lots of different studies involving English language learners suggest that multimedia can be effective in building understanding of words. And I know I said English language learners, but at this age, children are all learning language. So even if they're not learning language, this strategy is going to work with this. So we might bring in more pictures of the airport workers loading suitcases in the airplane so that they can make that connection even more so, but really integrating all this for them. Some more principles of effective oral vocabulary instruction, and this one is intervention. Choosing words to teach is an intentional teaching strategy to target all the children in our classroom. In bringing words to life, Robust Vocabulary Instruction by Isabel Beck and co-authors identify vocabulary tiers for teaching. And so we're going to look at those 3 different tiers. Tier 1 is one of the ones that we're going to touch at, but let's look at tier 1 and 3. Tier 2 words, when we're instructing them or teaching children, we do that very frequently. So we're going to focus a little bit more on tier 1 and 3 even more so. So tier 1 words. When we look at tier 1 words, it's those basic everyday words learned through conversation. They rarely require instruction in school. Some examples of those are like happy, big, clock, baby. And they're especially important to, again, thinking about those English language learners and what it means to them. When we're looking at tier 3 words, tier 3 is going to consist more of the words that are considered domain specific. We teach this in specific curricular themes. We teach at certain times of the year. When choosing tier 3 words, we're looking for words that only pertain to a specific content area or standard. If a word cannot generally be used among different levels of curricular ideas, then it is a tier 3 word. These words are usually heavily supported with scaffold in text by an author because they tend to need some heavy context for the children that we work with. And then we have our tier 2 words. These are, again, commonly referred to as general academic words. They are words that children can use over a variety of curricular areas such as language, math, science, and social studies. So they kind of go from content to content. These words are more prevalent in written words than in everyday speech, which is why we have them like in our vocabulary words or our word of the week. There's no research that indicates how many words to teach at one time, but 2 or 3 words at a time is cited appropriate for children within preschool. So when we're thinking about, okay, we have 3 tiers, which ones should we focus on? Which ones are the ones that I need to teach? There's 3 steps when it comes to selecting the words that you want to teach. First, do our homework, and as we're preparing our lessons for the week, we want to identify which are the words that I want to teach. Identify all of the difficult and potential unknowns words in the text, which is why it's so important that we pre-read that book so that we can identify those and be ready with that child-friendly definition and maybe something that's going to put it into context for them. Step 2 is to select new words for instruction. Words that are unfamiliar to the children, words that are likely to be useful within our day-to-day practices. They can be defined with a simple definition. We don't want to give the children too many words that they're going to get confused, but we want to make sure that they understand what we're providing to them. Have child-friendly examples, and then they're also used within context for the selection. And then step 3, we want to select methods for teaching words. We already talked about using it in context, using the child-friendly definition, but also relate the words to children experiences. What do they know about that word? Or how can I put it into context for them where maybe they did already have that exposure before? Create an image. Visuals are going to be key when it comes to teaching children. If we provide a visual of what we're saying, they're going to retain 60% more of that information versus if we're just orally saying it. We also want to infuse the word throughout the day for repetition and rehearsal. So that book, Graham is Coming to My Home, she's getting in different forms of transportation. There she is buying her ticket to get in on the plane. Some children may be exposed to that, but others, this may be totally new. So it's how do we bring it to them and how do we provide that context for them? Okay, so we reviewed the different ways that we can teach the words to children. Now let's look at 6 principles of word learning. Children use words to communicate effectively when speaking and when understanding what others say. Children will grow to their vocabularies as they engage in conversation with peers and also with us adults, and receive intentional vocabulary instruction associated with books and lessons. So let's think of 6 principles of word learning. We're going to look at frequency matters, making it interesting, being responsive, focus on meaning, being clear, and then having a reciprocal process. So those are the 6 principles of word learning that we're going to visit. So when we look at frequency matters, vocabulary words should be integrated into stories, sensory, science activities, anything that we can throughout our classroom for that frequency, so that the word is heard frequently in various contexts. And again, children begin to use it. So everything that you see here, maybe in our read aloud and listening center, but then we also put it into play in that sensory area. And we're asking them some open-ended questions so that they can incorporate and be part of that reciprocal interaction with the teacher. In the science area where children are going to be, again, visiting and working on it. Frequency matters still. We use as many ways as possible to introduce words for frequency, whether it be in a song or in a finger play, or even part of our daily routines. In our curriculum, we have something that is called commitment. So even incorporating it as part of that, so that children get that frequent use. And then, because we know that parents are our partners when it comes to educating their children, we also want to incorporate those through parent letters. So if we're focusing on the word alive, they didn't only see it in our science area or in our sensory, or they heard it on our story, but now we're also sending it to the parent so that the parent can help with integrating that word, and we're building that bridge between home and school for that learning to continue taking place, and that language development or that vocabulary development to continue at the home as well. Now let's look at making it interesting. Children learn words for things like games and events that are interesting to them. This is one way to make vocabulary interesting. We want to make sure that we're engaging them, that they're able to take part in those activities, whether it be using their body as a way to respond. We call that total physical response, or using a prop that they can use and be able to respond. So in this particular activity that you see on the screen, we're reading the book, and children have to determine whether it's alive or it's not. And so again, we can use a prop saying yes or no, engaging them in that activity, or they can use sign language, yes or no. And of course we would have to pre-teach these skills, but giving children an opportunity for that engagement so that it's interesting to them and they can participate and engage within that play. Being responsive is another one of those items that we want to make sure that we're incorporating. Children use key vocabulary in conversation with their peers and with the adults, rather than passive learning. And so we want to make sure that we're asking reflecting questions. If you notice in the activities that we have on the screen, we see those questions that we're going to be asking the children so that we can have a back and forth exchange, and we can continue the conversation about the activity that is on hand, that they're learning, or that we can continue to stress out that vocabulary that we want them to focus on. Focusing on meaning. Children learn word best in meaningful context. For example, using classroom objects or things in their environment when asking a question. So providing them with not only that child-friendly definition, but providing them with actual items that, oh, I hear it and I see it and I'm making sense of it. I'm bringing it together. And so that is going to be helpful for the children to really learn and understand that concept or that new word that we're trying to teach them. We also want to be clear. Children need clear information about word meaning. We want to introduce the word and then define it at the beginning of the week and use it throughout the whole week or throughout the theme that we're investigating. Because again, we want to make sure that they're understanding it. If we're giving them too many words, so if I were to define differently transportation and I'm giving them way too much that they can handle, they're not going to understand it. They're not going to retain that information. So I want to make it as child-friendly as possible. Reciprocal process. Going beyond the word, vocabulary learning and sentence structure are reciprocal processes. And so it goes back to, if the children is seeing how the word is written and we're modeling that for them consistently, and then we have it up in multiple places, then they're really getting that reciprocal process and they're able to really work with it and learn those different items. Some more tips. We want to share these extra tips on using read aloud or using reading for teaching tier 2 vocabularies. We want to plan ahead. That means reading the material before we even read it to the children, picking out those words that we want to teach. Maybe write some notes on definitions that we want to teach children, or looking for the synonym words that we can connect to them. Getting active, give children lots of chances to respond and participate. Activities that are quick and fast paced keep children very interesting. Have children answer questions as a group so that everyone gets a turn, or even turn to your partner and talk, and then bring it to the whole group together so that everybody is engaged and everybody's working together. And then plan for intervention. Children who need extra practice can practice in small groups with direct instruction. So as I'm having my small groups, I want to know my children so that I know what do I need to bring to a specific group of children. And I'm still helping them with achieving that vocabulary that I want them to have. So those were all the different tips and strategies that are available to you. We're getting to the end of our time together. And so in looking at what we discussed the importance of providing many opportunities for children to engage in activities that are going to assist in developing vocabulary so that we can build strong foundations for literacy success. Understanding that children in low socioeconomic families enter preschool with significant word gaps. We also looked at research-based principles of instruction, such as implicit and explicit instruction, and also intentional word selection. And we visited with 6 principles of word learning, understanding that frequency matters and we want to make sure that we're making it interesting. So as we conclude our time together, my hope is that you can take some of the strategies that were shared with you today to implement in your classroom, in your programs, and set a strong foundation for increasing vocabulary in young children.
Hey everyone, thank you so much, Claudia. I think everybody, can we give a round of applause, lots of clap emojis, because Claudia did such an amazing job.
Yeah.
Learned something new about vocabulary as an adult, so I went to see how everybody implements this with their students and their children. Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. If you haven't already, please join our EdWeb community. We have a lot of things to offer about early childhood education, and also a great sense of community for all of y'all to interact with each other, meet other teachers. Then also wanted to give just a quick reminder and shout out that we have early bird registration open for our Splash Learning Conference. This happens every year, and we have early bird pricing only for a bit longer, so wanted to share that. Hope to see some of you at Splash. Yeah, thank you for attending. Thank you again, Claudia. Claudia, we had some Q&A. Did you want to do those? We had quite a bit of Q&A. Did you want to do any of those questions on here, or would you like to answer them for everybody later?
We can do a few, and then maybe we can, whichever ones we don't get to, we can always put them back in the community, and that way the answers are there.
Great. I think that's a great idea. So one question I saw that came through, Claudia, somebody asked, what would you do to reduce shyness with vocabulary?
So I would say play a lot with the words. Have many opportunities as you're reading to incorporate those children who are a little bit shy. You may also want to go into small groups. So have them go in a small group and have that interaction with those children that one child feels a little bit more comfortable. Just like in any setting, we know that we have those people that we kind of like feel a little bit more comfortable with. And so if we do, then group them together, have them interact and engage there, and then slowly give them more opportunities for them to participate with the whole group. Because I used to be that little shy girl that, when they ask me a question, is like, don't make eye contact, don't look at me, don't ask me a question. But the more that we give them opportunities to engage with others, that turn and talk is going to be a perfect opportunity for them to get out from that shyness and really help them grow in that area.
Great. Yeah, I Definitely. I did not suffer with that. I was definitely extroverted, but my younger sister was definitely a shy one, and she struggled a bit, but the interaction definitely helped. So, yeah, it helps build vocabulary, right? Conversations, they help. All right. And then somebody asked, how many repetitions did you say? I think we got another question about repetition as well.
So I cannot stress enough the importance of repetition. One of the research documents said that anywhere from 18 to 20 repetitions. However, we learned from Dr. Pam Schiller that experiences wire the brain, repetition strengthens the wiring. Every child is going to be different in their learning, and so the more that we're exposing them and repeating throughout the day, the better off that we're going to be. There's no such thing as let's not repeat in early childhood. In early childhood is all like the more that we repeat, the better off children are going to be with gaining more skills.
And then somebody asked, what do you suggest for infants and toddlers? In EI, I tell parents to label everything. Any other activity suggestions for exposure?
Talk until you're tired of talking. That's the best exposure that we can give infant and toddlers. Map out everything that you're doing, map out everything that they're doing. As we're doing it, talk about it. Say, oh, I'm gonna pick you up, I'm putting you on the changing table, I'm changing out your diaper. All that you're giving them, that's more vocabulary that they're learning. Continue to read, continue to sing, not because they're 4 or 3 months means that they're not going to take that in. All that it's receptive, and so they're learning it. That exposure is just going to help with giving them many more opportunity to build that vocabulary. So lots of singing, lots of reading, lots of talking, mapping out your actions, mapping out their actions, and so forth.
Great. We have one more question. Do you have the article on repeated exposures? I have been looking for this information.
I do have that article. So when I answer these questions, I'll put the link to the article, and then you can go back and download it for yourself.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much, Claudia. Once again,
Thank
this
you.
is
I
EdWeb.
hope everybody has a great afternoon, and we wish you well.